everything started with death, actually. I know it's a very dramatic note to begin with, but don't worry, it's nothing too dramatic. Actually, my Maori teacher, Hemi Fox, whom I speak about in future also, he used to say that when somebody dies, they just go to another room. And so you can still talk to them, of course, only that you cannot see them. That's how it felt when in September 2018, I commenced my doctoral research journey, and together with it came the death of my grandmother. But the sense of somebody dying came a little bit earlier, when in January 2018, I opened my laptop and started writing my play Connections. And this dedication simply just fell out of me. So it wasn't like I was expecting for someone to die exactly, but I knew that this play will have to do something with losing. And actually, that's how I ended up experiencing death. Just before first reading of this play in September 2018, my grandma passed away after 6 months of illness, and one day after her funeral, I was performing this reading that you will witness in a second.
Gurkšnodamas raudonų plytų aklą, bando sukurti naują kodą savo galvą. Tu jau nežinai, iš kur vis atsiranda kažkoks vaizdas. O ir tai nepadeda, susikrauna kuprinę ir išvyksta pakeliauti į Taivaną, Malaiziją ar kokią kitą egzotišką pietryčių Azijos šalį. Nugairintas saulės ir prisisėmęs laisvamanišką gyvenimo įspūdžių, jis visuomet grįžta su pasitaisiusia nuotaika ir jo gyvenimo kodas vėl ima veikti puikiai. Sandra Algirdą ir sutiko vieną iš tų vakarų, kuomet jis sėdėjo bare, mėgindamas save persiprogramuoti. Tai įvyko tuo metu, kai Sandra vis dar tikėjosi pritapsinti prie kompanijos. Draugų, kurie visai...
So, very similarly like it is today, actually, with the resounding bell of the cathedral tower, I started my journey into the theater of consciousness. And it felt like my grandma was talking through this bell tower, because clearly she was trying to interfere this moment of glory that I finally got to represent this 9 months of labor, this new wonderful play which was supposed to change the theater completely. Of course, the message I received from her was, do not take yourself too seriously. And so I did. My journey into the theater of consciousness, hello guys, started from investigation of the audience engagement. And as per my grandma's advice, I did not take myself too seriously. I thought, okay, I'll just do it all. I'll think of all the ways I can engage the audience and I will try them in one project. And this is a little extract of how it worked.
Mirti šiandien jis nebuvo pasiruošęs, bet negalėjo nepastebėti, kad gabus vis grupių mokėsi. Gal ir tikrai ne prieš gerą, sunerimo jis.
Dabar Geratė jau visai neabejojo savo teisumu. Ji buvo įsitikinusi, jog tuoj ims ir užges saulę. Tik dar nežinojo nei ką tai reiškia, nei kodėl tai turėtų įvykti, bet jos kūną jau buvo užvaldęs šį žinojimus. O kūno pajūtimais jį vadovaudavosi daug dažniau nei proto.
Ir tarp žmogaus proto, kūno ir širdies nėra jokios atskirties. Kažkodėl toptelėjo Algirdui. Nėra visiškai jokio skirtumo. Užfiksavo ką tik per suvokimo prizmę perfiltruoti mintį, kuri nežinia iš kur atkeliavo. Kas man yra susiskrido koputės galva, tarsi ką tik pabudęs iš nemalonaus sapno. Šiandien neįtikėtinai keista diena. Neįtikėtinai.
Kas atsitiko? O jūs pagalvojat, kad mes niekad nebuvome susitikę dvyse?
Matyt, toks buvo autorius užmanymas.
Gal kažkas nesiskųskit.
O kas dabar?
Dabar jūs esat savo paties gyvenimo autoriai.
O kodėl taip tamsu?
Nes dar neįvyko sprogimas.
O kai jis įvyks?
O kai jis įvyks, jūratė vėl teks išnykti.
Kaip tu staiga pasidarei toks nuovokus?
Aš nieko nesuprantu.
Mažoji kosmonautė.
O kodėl tu turėsi išnykti?
Nes vienas žmogus negali gyvuoti naujos asmenys.
Šeima ar šachtą?
Ką?
Rinkis, Sandra.
O tu rinkis katiną.
Kodėl aš turiu rinktis?
Nes taip negali tęstis amžinai.
Tau tai reikia priimti sprendimą.
Bet aš nenoriu.
Man tavęs reikia, Sandra.
Man tavęs reikia, Sandra.
Vadinasi, tu esi aš.
Būtent.
Viskas painu.
Neklausykis, Sandra.
Sandra, tu juk žinai, kad Algirdas be ryšio.
Aš nieko nežinau.
Aš tau viską paaiškinsiu.
Sandra, neleisk jai būti autorė.
Atsiprašau.
Man, ši istorija yra ne apie Algirdą.
Ar jau labiau apie jūratę?
Yra apie jūs.
Apie jūsų ir mūsų buvimą drauge.
Kai pirmą kartą pristatėm šį pjesę, mes nežinojome, kas atsitiks Sandrai.
Mes nežinojome, kad jį pasirinks šis.
Mes nežinojome, koks pasirinkimas šis vis egzistuoja.
Nes aš galiu persiprogramauti.
O aš galiu atsidurti gyvenamųjų.
Viskas priklauso nuo autoriaus.
Tai tik Sandra ne.
Ji yra nepriklausoma.
Ji nieko neturi.
Ji niekam nepriklauso.
Nes niekas nepriklauso realiai.
Todėl ji negali,
Jie gali pasimenant žus.
nes ji pati.
Ji pati drebėsi.
Ji pati pasirinka tą kūrinį.
O vis dėlto yra.
Ji sąjunga kažko tam mūsų.
Ji yra.
Ji yra.
O Sandras nėra?
Sąjunga kažkur čia.
Išėjo kažką pasaiškinti.
Nes šitiek vaikai.
Išėjo. Kaip nori, pradėm šviesę.
Sąjunga išėjo.
Aš susulaikysiu.
Mes
Mes nebuvom.
Ji nepasirodė nebuvo.
Jos nebuvo. Ji buvo tik tada.
Lapkričio.
Ir mes manau, kad Sandra išgėlėse. Vilniuje.
Tada ji išnyko.
Aš dar nejaučiu jos buvimą.
Kas? Va.
Šalia.
O jeigu?
Jeigu.
O jeigu jis niekada nebūtų?
Ir jos nėra. Ir nėra mūsų.
Mums yra atsiliktis. Grįžk.
Kai perskaitė žodžius trumpi, bet jis nepatikėjo. Nuo to laiko, kai jis nusprendė, kad ji nenori būti savo gyvenimo autorė. Nuo to laiko aš visą laiką jaučiu ją esant šalia. Girdžiu ją lietaus viršuose. Matau ją šiuose žodžiuose, kompiuterio ekrane. Ir man visada primena, kad dideli dalykai vyksta tyliai.
Ir jūs? Mes nebuvom.
Susitikė? Nemanau. Bet ačiū.
Dabar kažką. Dabar minėtis pats.
Ačiū. Tai aš eisiu.
Panelė? Jūs kažko susuojat?
Aš eidavau į namo.
Nes jeigu jūs nesuobat,
O reikia pamatyti, kad nerandu.
paminėsiu. Paminėsiu.
Jūratė!
į kurią pusę?
Čia.
Puiku.
O kaip jūs draugai?
Tavo, vadinų metu.
Tavo draugai, sakė, kad jie neprieštarauja.
Ne?
Tikrai?
Galima visas du draugų, ne?
Gerai.
Kodėl man atrodo, kad mes pažįstame?
Vilnius man meras, bet buvo kažkas susidėjo. Gal.
So, Connections was my passion project, if you'd like to call it like that. It was my dream come true. I started writing it because I got the Lithuanian Council on Culture commission for 9 months to write this play. And I was super excited. I wanted it to explore audience connection for sure, but I also wanted it to be with music. And in the end, the idea was to turn it into a big musical that everyone participates in. This was a reading of the second reading of this play, and we tried to portray what it should look like in the final version, but unfortunately it never got to the final version of it. But why I showed this exact extract was because I wanted to show you different audience engagement techniques that I used there. And first one of them was just actors standing up and actually just not doing anything, which turns out is a very difficult thing to do for an actor, which is fine, of course, I understand, because it exposes something in them, I guess. But the idea was to really check how audience is creating content, how they are listening to the narrator, looking at the actor, what kind of imagery is triggered in their imagination. Second was more traditional one, of course. It was just actors talking in a traditional theater setting, performing as they do in normal theater. The third one was breaking the third wall, obviously, and speaking to the audience directly. Fourth one was, I didn't have a picture for it, but this one was sitting next to the audience and actually directly engaging with them. And from this, very many meanings actually appeared, because yes, it's a very different relationship when somebody refers to you directly. And the fifth one, and very important one, was to make an illusion that people just start joining in the show. So you would have musicians joining from the audience, then you would have somebody standing up and singing a little bit hesitantly, but the more they get involved, the braver they are, and then you hear this wonderful music coming out of that mouth. And yes, it was an amazing idea, and you saw also in this extra, some people were already doing this, and that for me, it really was meaningful. I was like, yes, they are in it. So I was super excited about continuing with this project, even though it seemed a little bit schizophrenic to mix all these different audience engagements. But I was passionate about it. And actually, from the showings that we actually had people saying that they did want to stand up and sing with the main singer. But that's not the point. The point is, of course, the obstacles. First obstacle definitely is finance. You don't have the money to do that. Okay, I have the money to write the play. How do I get funding to stage it? So of course I speak to different producers, and they want to know several things. They want to know the exact result of this. And for me, as a process-oriented person, I say, we will explore audience engagement, we will know how it works, we will have better understanding of it. That's not good enough, because they want to be more specific. Second problem was often that they didn't know who was I, whether I'm a playwright or I'm a director, and why do I perform? Why is there my voice in there also? Like what was the speciality that I had? What was my area of expertise? And I couldn't quite place myself anywhere, because yes, I do different things in different projects wherever I feel they are appropriate. But that's not the most important thing. Actually, all of these are manageable, but the third thing was the motivation from myself, because the more I spoke to people, the more I realized that there is some serious clash in our understanding about what theater is and what should it do, because it felt like, they want something from it that would bring a result, that would bring good sales, that would bring at least acknowledgement, if not the sales. And I wasn't quite sure if that's where I'm headed. Because for me, it was, it was fun. It was great. We will do this together. It will be amazing. Apparently it's not enough, but that's how I started. And that's in all this process, I actually started to believe and to measure myself according to these values. I started feeling really bad about myself, that I am not only a director or only an actor, that I tried to do all these different things, so maybe I am not good enough in any one of them. And I also felt really bad that, I don't have anything that has good sales and is not popular. And, the more I tried to find a way to stage the show, the worse I felt. And the more I felt the pressure to do a good result, the less I felt capable of delivering anything at all. And so, as I looked back upon this stage in my life, I sort of had to make sense of what had happened and why the project fell through. And this this figure, or this diagram, was really helpful actually in understanding and making sense of things, because this is actually done by Richard Schechner, a performance maker and researcher. and also the beginner of, or the pioneer of, performance studies subject. And he said that performance can be anything, actually. He really expanded the understanding of performance, but he said that performance should fall into one of these categories, or rather, they are always in these categories, and those categories are normally related, but you're focusing on one. So you could heal, deal with divine and demonic, entertain, teach, make or change identity, foster community, and create beauty. But as I looked at myself in the beginning of this doctoral research journey and the place I was at with the project connections, I really could not place myself anywhere in these categories because I could only think of this thing. How can I gain socioeconomic status? That was sort of the main idea in my head, that was something that I need to do by making theater. And I did not feel happy about it. I felt that my actions are a little bit meaningless. So I had to stop myself there and really look inwards and think, okay, why am I doing this and what am I doing? And is there anything at all that excites me about performance and theater making in the end? And the mental image that I had in my head was not related to theater at all, actually. It was related to a different kind of practice. And this practice is called Maori bodywork. Now, I witnessed this several years back, and actually, it was not a show per se, it was not a theatrical show. Well, if you will look at the categories of Schechner, we will be able to place this thing in somewhere in between creating beauty and healing and changing identity. And it was something that really stuck with me because of the level of concentration that performer of this bodywork had, and because of the certain purity in that intention, which I was incapable of getting to when I was doing my play connections. And so I decided I need to learn this thing, how they do this. Fortunately, I found information online that the training was available in a few weeks, coincidentally. The trainer, Raimonda, who is here today, thank you for coming. She taught me many things about Maori. But before I proceed in my conversation about it, I would like to show you a little bit of what this practice looks like. This is just one aspect of it, the bodywork. There is much more to it. But yes, I cannot produce the mental image that I had in my head at the time, but you can look at a video that somebody made, somebody who experienced the Maori bodywork, and afterwards they made this video. So you can watch. If you want more, you need to go to Jurga and see how she does that. But actually, for me, it was not so much about experiencing this on my own skin as it was observing it. Actually, live, it feels somehow incredible. It feels very pure, very true, very authentic, which I sometimes struggle to find in theater. And as I started learning this practice, I realized that it's got to do with the understanding of consciousness and the applications of these ideas in the practical, in practice, in life. And so I realized that, I need to learn more about consciousness myself too. But before I proceed with my discussion on consciousness, I would like you to speak to me a little bit and tell me, if you can, what is your understanding of consciousness? You don't have to be clever or anything. I mean, there are ideas people have about what consciousness is, so maybe you could share. Go ahead.
Consciousness is energy, mind is all the mechanisms of life and the body and the mind. It really is just the true line that every single thing that works can do for.
Yes. Great. That's true. Anyone else has any ideas? Yes. Being awake. Okay. In connection with the surrounding world. Makes sense. Anyone else? I was expecting more of a participation, but it's okay. So we cannot do the vote, for the best idea and all that. That's a shame. But yes, you are right. Both of you are right, of course, because there is no single definition so far that would fit all, understanding of consciousness. And actually, as I was heading to the Science of Consciousness conference, which is the longest running Science of Consciousness conference in the world, from what I know, I was hoping to get some clear answers, because you have people who have been studying it for many, many years and spend their lifetimes trying to prove some theories. And I realized, okay, they all have very different and conflicting understanding of what consciousness is. And they actually did that. They did a popularity vote during the conference. They said, okay, so let's vote. Which idea is the best? And as you see, the result is over there. And in this conference, of course, we cannot take this too seriously because they also did it with a good sense of humor. But in this diagram, you can see that the idea of consciousness, the understanding of it, is pretty much split between 5 theories. And one of them is panpsychism. Now, it's the second winning theory. And it's the theory that I actually subscribe to, or the understanding of consciousness. And panpsychism actually claims that everything has a mind. So it comes from Greek expression. Pan means everything. Psyche, I'm sorry for the Greek speakers, they will probably correct me, but it means soul or mind. So contemporary understanding is that panpsychism means that everything has a mind. Now, it also splits into 2 different types of panpsychism, but I'm not going to go into too much detail there because for me, important is this one thing, that everything has a mind. And it's very much the idea that Polynesian traditional culture subscribes to. And Maori is the art that comes from Polynesia. So I have learned a lot about this culture also. Now, Polynesia is the collection of islands in the Pacific Ocean. And on one side you have Hawaii, then you have New Zealand, and then you have Easter Island there, and it forms a sort of a triangle. But all of these cultures, they sort of have a very similar understanding of the world, of the worldview is fairly similar, and they all believe that everything is connected to everything, basically. You probably know this term aloha from Hawaii, and many of people know it as a greeting, but actually aloha, even though there is no clear definition for it in English language, but it would pretty much define a force that holds together existence. So this is pretty much the understanding of consciousness also in terms of panpsychism. there is even trivia, even a law in Hawaii that obliges you to live according to the aloha spirit. And that means that you need to emote good feelings to others. This is sort of the idea of it, because this is the understanding of reality. Why would I not emote good feelings for somebody else if they are connected to me? So that means by hurting another, I would be hurting myself too. So this idea is also very prevalent not only in Hawaii, but also in Maori culture, because they think that they are connected not only to the human beings, but also to the land and everything what's on the land, all the living creatures. And they even have the saying, which I will not dare to pronounce in Maori, sorry, but it says that people will perish, but the land is permanent. So that sort of shows that, you know, they're really connected to the land. And this is not only a theoretical idea, which they have. Actually, if you witness the lives of the Maori people, those who practice that cultural beliefs, it's really pretty obvious that they live by this rule. Because I personally witnessed somebody just talking to a sacred stone, and they were referring to it as a friend, as a relative, rather than just, you know, a piece of rock. So yes, and also it's also very obvious from the way they introduce themselves. If you go to a Maori ceremony of greeting, you will hear them before their own introduction. They will introduce their native mountain, their river, and their lake, because they believe that this is what is important to introduce when speaking about yourself, your waka papa or your genealogy. So, as I said, this is not just something that they theoretically think of, it's actually what they live in practice. And for me, it was fascinating to see all this, because, you know, I also think, okay, I respect nature and everything, but when I behave very differently from what I actually believe in. And there is truth to that also in the Polynesian culture, because obviously those ties with nature or those relationships have very much been eroded by the process of colonization. And I related to that because I feel in many ways that my culture has also been colonized by the 50 years of occupation of the USSR. And I do feel the effects of it, because I was taught to believe that somebody else's culture is superior to mine. And that's why it was very, very similar to what I found in New Zealand and what I witnessed in the daily lives of Maori people. But unfortunately, you know, there is a way out of this colonization processes and out of the high crime rates and suicide rates and all the problems that actually came with colonization. And what the Maoris do, and what also people, Hawaii natives do, they try to bring the people back to their culture, bring to their roots, introduce those techniques and those understandings that they have been made to forget. And it works in very powerful ways, I must say, from what I saw. But I will not speak about it. I will show you an example of how it works, because I think this is very interesting to see. So this is the story of Upu and a very powerful performance practice, I would say, because truly it shows that it has a way to change people's lives. And as I said, I related to this process of colonization. I feel like I was colonized as a Lithuanian, but also I feel like my way of thinking was very much colonized by men. And I was never too much of a feminist, and as a matter of fact, actually, I grew up believing this phrase totally. I don't mind living in a man's world as long as I can be a woman in it. And that was my way of thinking for a very long time, but eventually I realized that perhaps I could be a little bit happier if I had more of a female world. And also thinking about Marilyn Monroe, who was a star and presumably had a rich life, rich of experiences. But she did commit suicide at the age of 36, so perhaps she was not too happy living in the man's world. And I started investigating what is it like to live in a woman's world. And of course, these investigations always start from theater and from making my creations. So I'm very grateful to some of the actresses that assisted me in this journey. And this is something that we started developing. I will show you an extract.
Matot, aš niekada nesvajau būti stipria moterim.
Niekada nenorėjau. Jei kas būtų leidę rinktis, manau,
kad nebūčiau tavo pasirinkus.
Nebūčiau pasirinkus būti moterim. Ar bent jau būčiau pasirinkus būti silpna moterim, suprantat?
Man patinka būti silpnai.
Ir tikrai nebūčiau pasirinkus būti protinga. Taip, jei galėčiau rinktis protinga ar graži, tikrai nepasirinkčiau būti protinga.
Norėčiau būti graži ir viskas.
Jei jau moteris, tai bent jau graži. Jokių būdų neprotinga.
Tikrai, jeigu galėčiau rinktis, norėčiau būti graži ir kvaila moteris.
Ir dar silpna. Taip, norėčiau būti graži, kvaila ir silpna moteris. Ir viskas.
Ir to pakanka. O dabar esu stipri ir protinga. Ir ką padarysi?
Sako, kiekviena moteris yra truputėlį aktorė. Sako, kiekviena moteris vaidina. Imituoja šypseną, imituoja ašaras, imituoja orgazmą, dažosi akis, lūpas, pudruojasi skruostus. Sako visą tai, kad patenkinti vyrą. Feministė sako, kad tokį vaidmenį mums sukūrė patriarchalinė visuomenė. Sako, toks vaidmuo mums buvo sukurtas visuomenės.
Bet aš nežinau. Man patinka būti gražiai. Man patinka ryškiai raudona spalva pasidažyti lūpas. Išeiti į kiemą pasipuošus gražią suknelę. Man patinka būti matomai.
Man patinka, kai mane žiūri. Ir nieko aš nenoriu suvilioti, man tiesiog patinka būti pastebėtai.
So these are the most recent developments in the project Insecurity in the brackets. I started developing it a long time ago. It was 2017, I believe. And it was started with actresses Severina Špakovska, Gabrielė Nečaitė, and Miglė Remeikaitė. Then later on, these actresses changed, and you saw here Adelina Skaladytė, Eglė Agota Matulaitytė, and Miglė Remeikaitė again. But yes, it started from us women just talking about, what is it like to be a woman at all, and not necessarily having judgmental views about this bad world, but what, perhaps what would we do differently if we were to rule the world our way. Yes, I'm gonna play you another extract from this play, because it's actually a play, it has a script, and it was recorded here in the Balcony Theater, and later on displayed in Lebanon. Maybe you could put my light down.
Yeah, ничего, kad nieko nedarytum. Tuoj, padarysiu.
Gerbiami žiūrovai, nepamirškite išsijungti mobiliųjų telefonų. Jo, reiks kažkaip pasakyti gal prieš tai, ne? Šiaip reikėtų gal pasakyti, kad vyks tamsoje. Nenori? O kodėl? Kad nelauktų šviesos, gal nežinau. Jeigu kas nors dar laukia, tai arba tipo dabar matys, kaip, ar kiekvienas neturi savo pristatyti. Ne. Man tai nutinka, kad jie nežinos, ar tai šviesa bus, ar ne. Ai, okei. Tai kaip yra? Dega šviesa, susėda, gėdušinga šviesa ir tada mes atsisuojame. Galim tai padaryti, jo. Čia lauks, kad prasidės tikras spektaklis. Galim tai padaryti. Atsistojam ir tada vienu metu, dar gali palaukti, biškį gal pastovėsim, tada čia viskas nurimsta, susigau pati iš savęs ir man pasakyti, laikykis taip, kaip pasakytų man prieš spektaklį. Nes man reikia palaikymo.
Viskas tuoj patikrinu.
Ir pataisykit mane, bet man atrodo, geriau labai tyliai, bet nešnibždom, negu šnibždom, bet perspaustai. Suprantate, nes jeigu pašnibždom, bet labai jo, tas, ką tu sakai prieš tai, kad toks jau specialiai labai, tai geriau tu ten kažkokį pusbalį sugal, bet
pirmas įsakyk šnibždom, nesvarbu, jie išgirs, neišgirs, čia ne... Jeigu dar būna, svarbu, kad tu išgirstum. Svarbu, kad aš išgirstum. O atsimenat kokį žodį klausimą? Nes taip ir nepradėsim.
baigsim nepradėję.
Gerai, renkasi žiūrovai.
Renkasi žiūrovai.
Arnoldas pažiūrė mane, sako, jau visi.
Tada tu...
Ar tikrai Arnoldas? Sako, jo. Ar tikrai jo.
Tada Arnoldas dar paprašysim, kad išsijungtų telefonus. Pasakytų.
Ir užtrauktų žodžius, kad jais nevaikščiotų. Svegu suvaldyti magiją, jeigu pasidaryti.
Tada geriausia užrakinti iš vis. Arba pastatyti žmogų laukia.
Nu gerai, pabandom. Taip, sueina žmonės.
Užsidaro duris.
Užsidaro duris.
Ir va taip užtemsta.
Kažkokia keista prasme visuomet jaučiau, kad mane kažkas saugo. Kažkas sėdi ant dešinio paties ir tyliai jausi šnabžda. Kažkokia keista prasme to žinojimo užtenka, kad galėtum toliau. Kad galėtum judėti į priekį. Laikykis. Už mano nugaros pasigirsta mamos balsas. Ir aš tvirčiau įsikambu į nepažįstamą ranką. Esame kelyje. Kažkur prie Ukmergės. Aplink daugybę besišypsančių veidų. Stipriai kaitina saulė. Ir jos spinduliai taip maloniai šildo mano veidą, kad norisi juose ištirpti.
Greta stovintis nepažįstamasis žiūri mane. Jo žvilgsnis švelnus.
Jo akys šypsosi.
Šiandien ypatinga diena,
sako man mama.
Šiandien mes kūrėme istoriją.
Ir nors aš nežinau, ką tai reiškia, bet žinau, kad tai turbūt kažkas labai svarbaus. Todėl aš laikausi. Dar tvirčiau įsikabinu į nepažįstamą ranką, o mama įsikimba į plevėsuojančią vėliavą. Ir mes abi laikomės.
Viena kitos, vėliavos, nepažįstamoje ir kažkokia nesuprantama saita, kuris laiko mus drauge.
Ir kažkodėl žinau, kad viskas bus gerai.
Ir mane užlieja švelni vienybės banga.
So that's how it started, this play, when I played it in Lebanon in 2019, December. And I brought it there because I got an unexpected invitation. But actually, I didn't know exactly which piece I'm going to show, and they didn't know which piece I will be showing. They just invited me because they liked my ideas, let's say. And the thing is that there was a strange coincidence about it, because this play is basically about a woman who is being spoken for by four different women. And it's the story of her life, and in this life many things happen, but the starting point is the Baltic Way, and there is also another event that takes place in this play, and it doesn't take place in Lithuania. I'll just play the moment that describes it in my play.
Kas ir teka per dvarelį, rygailio, saulė teka per dvarelį, rygailio. Grįžtu namo su nuojauta, kad pasaulyje kažkas pasikeitė. Kažkas ėmė ir pakito negrįžtamai. Tavo batai purvini, sakau jam. Tavo batai yra purvini. Kiek aš tau kartų sakiau nusivalyti batus. Kodėl aš turiu žiūrėti į tavo purvinus batus? Aš noriu jam kažką pasakyti. Jisai sėdi priešais mane ir aš noriu jam kažką pasakyti. Noriu jam papasakoti apie gravitaciją. Pasakyti, kad gravitacijos saitai yra stipresni už mane, kad aš negalėjau jiems pasipriešinti. Bet žiūriu į jo purvinus batus ir man taip šlykštu. Aš noriu jam kažką pasakyti. Aš noriu jam pasakyti viską, bet jis manęs negirdi.
Jam tai rūpi kažkoks arabų pavasaris.
Juk dabar viduržemis.
Norisi jam išrėkti.
Aš noriu vėl užsiropšti jam ant nugaros ir pasileisti gatve.
Įsikibti į jo garbanotus plaukus ir vėl pasijausti saugiai.
Šiandien ypatinga diena. Šiandien tūkstančiai žmonių išėjo gatves protestuoti atšaunais. Jis ieško būdų grįžti į tėvynę ir nepaklausė, ar noriu vykti drauge. Tai nesaugu, sako jis, tarsi perskaitęs mano neištartą mintį.
Bet juk mes saugus, kai esam drauge. Juk esame saugus, kai esam drauge.
Dabar važiuojame oro uostą nejaukioje tyloje. Laikykis.
Vienintelis žodis, kurį jam ištariu atsisveikindama, yra laikykis.
So, as you can hear in the script, the two events mentioned here are the Baltic Wave and also the Arab Spring in the Middle East. And coincidentally, when I arrived to Lebanon, they had the uprisings again, and there were big meetings taking place in the streets because people demanded revolution. They wanted to change their government because, their government is quite corrupted to this day, actually. And it was not only an event that was taking place, hi Vigle, one of the actresses. It was not only the event that was taking place in Lebanon, it was also taking place in the entire Middle East. And surprisingly, even though I written those words in 2017, they very much resonated in 2019. But this wasn't the main coincidence, actually. As I was rehearsing the play in Lebanon, in the National Theater in the city called Tiro, it was an event called International Arts Festival over there. They decided, the colleague of mine told me that actually there was an event in Lebanon which has taken place there just over a month ago. And it was very similar to that which we experienced in Lithuania 30 years ago, back then. And it was the Lebanese way, where people held hands throughout the stretching length of Lebanon, and that happened in 27th of October 2019. And actually, I don't know how much you know about the history of Lebanon, which I didn't know back in the day, but now I am well aware that there was a 15-year civil war, where neighbor was made to turn against another neighbor because they were different religions. So to stand there like this in 2019, when people of different religions and different cultural backgrounds were holding hands, was quite a significant moment. And so I was, of course, pleased that this happened not so long ago, and it resonated with my play. And I definitely exploited that moment by saying, look, I am writing about this. And they gave me an award, but it's okay. No. I believe it wasn't because of that, but I want to believe. But yes, this brought my attention to the idea of synchronicity. And now the synchronicity is something that I think many of us have experienced, and I do experience it a lot during the time of performance creation. It just so happens that, things start happening around, they sort of come together, and you notice that one thing relates to another. But I never took it too seriously, and then I realized, okay, this is happening. I should look into it. Maybe it's an actual thing. There is some research done into it, and there is research done into it. Actually, Jung was the first one to coin the concept of synchronicity, but in contemporary understanding, it's sort of a phenomenon where an event in the outside world coincides meaningfully with a psychological state of mind. So that means I think of something, and all of a sudden, I find something similar in my everyday reality, and that feels like a synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence. And so I realized that this synchronicity has something to do with the state of mind or state of consciousness, because actually very often this word of mind and consciousness is used interchangeably. And the person that gave a sort of an explanation for me, which intuitively felt right, was David R. Hawkins, and he said he connected it to letting go of the sort of negative emotions and getting into the state of what he called the higher states of consciousness. And he is the author of this states of consciousness map, which is pretty popular worldwide, though not so popular in the world of science, because there isn't enough significant data to support it, I believe. But he's dead now, but he claims that he did not just come up with it out of his imagination. He actually made empirical experiments with people, and he used this method of kinesiology, which sort of connects the state of being and the strength of your physical body. So that means the lower state of consciousness you're in, basically, the weaker your body is. So if you're feeling blame, you feel very weak, and if you're feeling like you are optimistic and forgiving and understanding, you feel powerful. And intuitively, to me, it feels right. So that's why I liked this idea. And he also proposed that up to the level of pride, we sort of live in the paradigm where we tend to use force, physical force, rather than mental power. And so that's why he coined this concept of, power versus force, and he wrote a book about it. And so for him, this distinction was very important. And for me, it worked, except of the fact that he prescribed numbers to certain states of consciousness, which when I think about it, and I think when many people think about numbers, they sort of understand that what is lower is bad and what is higher is good. And that I didn't quite like, because I don't think we should be looking at emotions or states of consciousness as something good or bad, because in itself, any sort of state is not good or bad. So that was my problem with it, but I do like it as a general attempt to sort of relate what is happening in our state of consciousness and what is happening to our body. But the more interesting insights I received from my Maori training, actually, who introduced this idea of Maori understanding of reality. And in this understanding, they say there are 4 worlds of perception. The first world is more related to the physical reality, the second world to the emotional reality, third world is more of a spiritual reality, and fourth world is beyond our understanding. At first I found it quite confusing, so I just tried to imagine how would they define a human being in each of those levels of understanding, and I thought, okay, so first world is representative of a human being as a combination of cells and atoms. If you look at it from the second world perspective, it's I define myself in relationship to other human beings. And from the third world perspective, I define myself not only in relation to other human beings, but probably in relation to my past and my future. So my origins, my relatives from before, and from the people that I am going to meet in the future. Fourth world of understanding is completely beyond all of these notions. And actually such a form as human being, as I understand, doesn't exist in the fourth world as of understanding. So this is my sort of very superficial probably idea, because I'm not from that culture. I just heard explanations and I sort of applied those understandings in my reality. And they work for me because they opened new meanings in the world. Because yes, I mean, we tend to not speak about spirituality because often it is related with religion, and religion is related with power abuse and so on. So that's why I sort of, had to erase that level of reality from my everyday. I was happy that through this understanding, I could claim it back. Now, if we go back to synchronicities, Dawson Church, who is a researcher of mind and matter, or relationship between mind and matter, he says that actually synchronicity is a sign of emergence. And emergence is something that, emerges in our reality. That's something that appears as if out of nowhere by the process of self-organization. And he's saying, okay, emergence is happening everywhere. The way ants build their little houses is also a form of emergence. And the flocking of the birds as they fly and they sort of come together nicely, this is emergence. And he explains that emergence is just a movement from low-level rules to higher-level sophistication. So that means when something is moving from one level of understanding, let's say, to another level of understanding, we experience synchronicities and therefore witness emergence. And when I applied this idea to the Maori worlds of understanding, I thought, okay, perhaps then we could somehow understand theater as something that is emerging from the third layer of reality to the second layer of reality. And that kind of made sense to me. Therefore, synchronicities appear as a sign of emergence, and then we notice them and we know that there is something happening that needs to be acknowledged. So these are my considerations. They're not scientifically proven, but this is my proposal. Whereas the actual proven research on synchronicity, it's saying that in 2009, it was actually noticed that synchronicity appears during the experiences of emotional intensity. So that means major life transitions such as births and deaths and marriage. And I would say it makes sense to me that they would appear during a time of, a good piece of art, experiencing good piece of art, because obviously this is a moment of emotional intensity. And also my own experience proves this, of course, because if I go back to where I started, to the death of my grandmother, the synchronicities were happening in that period of time to me also in terms of creativity. Because as I mentioned, it was the death, then it was the funeral, then it was the reading. Next thing was Doctors in Performance conference here, exactly day after reading. And I came to see it because, I wanted to see how people research things in arts through this artistic means, which is quite a new territory for all of us. But it was a conference more related to music, so I wasn't too excited about it in the beginning. And I was about to leave, actually, and on my way out, I met this guy, Yaksik, who started talking to me, and he said, I have this presentation on improvisation. Maybe you'd like to join, maybe you go on stage. I said, no, I'm not going on stage in your presentation, don't expect that ever happening. But he said, okay, just come see it anyway. And I went there and I spoke, and I heard him speak about mental rehearsal, which very deeply resonated with me. And yes, I did go on stage because I'm an attention seeker in the end, and I couldn't hold it, and I went on stage and we did the little performance. It wasn't anything major or anything, but it was the start of our connection. And as I looked at this picture, this was taken from the profile of the organizers of the conference. It reminded me of mental image of a play that I was writing several years back. It was called Mind the Gap, and it was about a pianist who was the main character there. And at the time, I was crazy looking for a pianist who could help me develop it, and he was supposed to be speaking English, and it was all very complicated, and I couldn't find him, so I sort of let that sit and rest a little bit. But when I met Jaak, I realized, oh, right, I found this person who could help me develop it. And this was a very nice way of understanding the possibilities of mental rehearsal also, because clearly I was rehearsing this Mind the Gap project for quite a long time in my imagination. And here you go. It all of a sudden happened when I least expected it, and I found someone I could develop Mind the Gap play with. So, yes, I go back a little bit. My collaboration with Jaak started here in this conference, Doctors in Performance, but it continued on our weekly chats, and also he invited me to go and witness his experiments in artistic research. I also was co-teaching with him a little bit, and then I joined his concert in which we performed, people from different disciplines performed in a performance after a series of mental rehearsals. And I decided to take this further and implement this mental rehearsal process in the process of theater making. Now, mental rehearsal is as simple as it gets. It's just rehearsing things in your imagination. And it is a method which is widely used with sportsmen and musicians also, the pianist especially. And there is some solid research done into this area because it seems to be very effective, efficient, and they say that even muscle growth is noticeable after people rehearse moving that finger. So that means by the power of imagination, I actually have some physical impact on my body. But that wasn't something that interested me the most, because for me it's a well-proven fact that mental rehearsal works. You can rehearse something and then you can replay it in physical reality. For me, it was though more interesting as a process of devising theater. And so what I asked Jaak was to perform with me this little performance experiment, which we devised in our imaginations after reading this play that I mentioned, Mind the Gap, and after rehearsing once a week for 1 hour, just sitting down and really trying to picture how would this performance go. And I asked Jaak to write notes after every rehearsal and send them to himself, not to me, so I would not be aware of them. And then after the performance, he sent them to me directly. And so I'll just display a little extract from how it went. It was performed here in Vilnius in our Mickevičius library. So the little box you saw there appearing in a comics-like comment actually was a thought in Jaak's imagination that I, after reading his notes, related to that video. So I tried to connect really what he wrote in his notes and what actually happened on the night. of performance. And there were some interesting coincidences because, for example, and that's the reason why I displayed exactly this video, he wrote a lot about geometrical shapes, which was not something I mentioned in the play at all, and it was not something that I envisioned in my imagination, but it's something that I did start doing in the performance, so walking in these circles and the triangles. And it was interesting how it sort of felt in a way that he rehearsed me or somehow rehearsed something in his imagination, which he later provoked in the theater stage. So this was very interesting for me, and I decided to take this further on even, and I found two people from the Copenhagen International Performing Arts, Copenhagen International School of Performing Arts, that's the correct name. And they were the alumni that studied there. You can see them here. Sylvia Skonechko, who I believe is also online, and Dan Ashneal. What they did, they worked with me online because it was the time of the pandemic, and they had 4 weeks of intense work. In the first week, we were meeting up every day for 1 hour a day, and we were talking about mental rehearsal, and we were practicing it live, like you see here in the call screenshot. And then for the rest of the weeks, they were rehearsing this Mind the Gap script in their imagination for the same period of time, for 1 hour each day, 5 days a week, for 3 weeks. And every week I was giving them different directions. So for example, picture the play taking place from the perspective of a character, picture it from your co-performer's perspective, and so on. So they were changing these directions. And the end result was interesting because they managed to have a good, let's say, stage movement. I mean, they had good blocking, that's the name. They had good blocking, as it was noticed by the audience members, and also audience claims, even though I was not there myself because the time of the pandemic and I could not travel. But they say that there was a sort of sense of emergence. So somebody really tapping into what they call collective subconscious. Because I was not there to witness it, I did another experiment which I could do live by myself, and this happened in Athens, in Greece, at the International Festival of Making Theater. And I had an opportunity to work with different actors, different groups of actors for 3 hours, maybe with 3 groups. And I also explained them the mental rehearsal process, and I asked them to rehearse this play, but this time only for 15 minutes. And they, a pair of them would be rehearsing one piece of performance, and then they would go and perform it. And actually, surprisingly, the result was very similar in terms of the sense of emergence. And actually, I have this one person who have witnessed both of the performances live, and she said that yes, there was this sense of them meeting for the first time, but also really listening to each other, which is a very nice quality to have in performance, and also very much related to the dramaturgy of the piece, because the story is about the people meeting for the first time. So yes, my thinking from there on was that maybe I'm thinking about the process of mental rehearsal in some not correct way, because I'm comparing it to the physical rehearsal, and these might be different kind of principles that work on this process. And perhaps you don't need such long rehearsal process as you do with the physical rehearsal, because the effects of mental rehearsal can happen instantly. And therefore, I developed a different way of using mental rehearsal in performance practice. And I would love to demonstrate it here. But I need a volunteer. Anyone? Don't be scared. Good. Come here. Okay, hello. I will not pretend I don't know your name. This Milda, one of my actresses, but she does not know what is going to happen. And you have not seen Mind the Gap, or have you?
I've seen.
You've seen the.
Yeah.
You've seen my show.
Yeah, I've seen the Copenhagen version.
Copenhagen version is different. It's okay. We have a new version now, so she doesn't know what is going to happen exactly. Now, you'll be Boris. Okay, your name will be Boris for the purpose of this rehearsal. There is a piano there, okay? This is a piano stool that you will be asked to sit at as Boris, okay? Now, you don't have to do it right now. Now you have to sit in this place, the seat. Can we have the light on Milda? And don't forget, you are not Milda, you are Boris. For the purpose of this rehearsal, you are Boris. And so as Boris, you do whatever is written on the screen that Boris does, right? So Boris does something that is written on the screen. But at the same time, Boris is also Tom, you know? Boris is performing Tom. So whenever there is name Tom on the screen, you also do the things that it says, but you do them in your imagination only, okay?
So Tom is imaginary character, and Boris is the one that actually acts.
Exactly, that's right. So the actions of Tom, only in your imagination. The actions of Boris, you actually do what it says to do. Okay, piano there, stool there, Milda here. Okay. And don't rush, just do whatever it says on the screen. Okay, and if you don't understand, just take your time to read and figure it out. It's okay, nobody knows what's going to happen. Neither do I. Okay. Vienuolika atmestų paraiškų. 11 nepatenkintų finansavimo prašymų. Tokia yra pjesės Mind the Gap kelionė. Ir nors dėl labai riboto biudžeto, dėja, ji taip ir nepasiekė tokios formos, kokios norėjo jos dramaturgė, vis dėlto režisierė džiūgauja. Nes šis pralaimėjimas privedė mus iki šio momento. Momento, kuriame esame jūs ir aš. Ir aš nesu pagrindinė veikėja šį vakarą, nes pagrindinis veikėjas yra kolektyvinis įsivaizdavimas. You okay? Sorry, this is a little bit long, but I will call you in a second. Ir vis dėlto aš tikiu, kad vieną dieną jūs tikrai pamatysit šią pjesę čia. Londono Royal Court teatre. Teatre, kuris pažymėjo 1956 metais visą dramaturgijos teatro istoriją Didžiojoje Britanijoje. Bet kada tai vyks? Kadagi Mind the Gap pjesė pasieks Didžiąją Royal Court sceną? Tai nuspręsti galite jūs, šio žaidimo vadinamo spektakliu žiūrovai. O kol kas pakvieskime į sceną muzikantą, improvizuotoją ir mano kolegą, šį vakarą vaidinsite drauge, Boris Kulenovič. Deja, Borisas, kaip ir jūs, kol kas nežino savo vaidmens. Bet kadangi jisai yra drąsus improvizuotojas, jis pasiryžo dalyvauti šiame performance, vadovaudamasis nurodymais ekrane. Is this right, Boris? Šį vakarą aš paprašiau Boriso, kad atliktų Tomo vaidmenį. Bet tuo pat metu aš paprašiau, kad Borisas visiškai nevaidintų. Aš paprašiau Boriso, kad jis atliktų visus Tomo veiksmus tik tai savo vaizduotėje. Visus išskyrus vieną – groti pianinu. Mums labai pasisekė, kad Borisas nėra aktorius. Dėl to aš esu tikra, kad jis šį vaidmenį atliks puikiai. Ir jam pavyks visiškai nevaidinti. Bet grįžkime prie Mind the Gap. Nuo ko jis prasidėjo? O viskas prasidėjo nuo vaizdinio. Thank you, Boris. It was just a little extract from the play, Mind the Gap, as it is in its current state. Generally, I perform it with an improviser, musician who is not aware of what is going to happen. So every time it needs to be a new person. And then they improvise based on the mental imagery that they produce during the show. So the idea is that, we are observing them as they are producing those mental images, and mental images become the inspiration for the improvisation on the night. So this is immediate effects of the mental rehearsal in action. In the imagination of the musician, but at the same time, in the imagination of the audience. So yes, this is a work which I've grown to hate and then love and hate again and love again, but it's currently kind of working and does have quite a decent audience reception. So I hope to take it to many more places. But I guess, yes, now I will conclude my lecture, and I cannot never speak about myself without referring to Tim Crouch. Sometimes I'm actually embarrassed how much I quote him, but it's true. He's a huge source of inspiration for me. And he said, I started writing for theater in order to stop moaning about it. So he was dissatisfied with what he saw on stage, and so he decided he wants to make his own world, his own reality, and he does it very successfully. Look him up if you have a chance. It's definitely a great reference. But this is my line of thinking also, People say, why you write? You will never be good as Chekhov, just take some great work and stage it. But there is something about me and my own identity, the way that I understand world, and even if those works that I do are clumsy, but realistic to me and more telling about what I see in this world and how I perceive this reality. And there is also another reason why I write and I direct, because I think, as I've been taught, there is no difference. There is no need necessarily to make a distinction, because the way I see those mental images, they don't necessarily come as words only. They come as full staging. So I really cannot give up this work and explain to someone else how to direct, because I know what it should look like on stage. So basically, I work from the mental images rather than just from some text, and then putting some layers on it. And I realized that actually this is not necessarily something that everyone does, and there is a very clear understanding of what theater should be. And I said, as I mentioned in the beginning, it was the root of my conflict, that there is the sense that there is this traditional theater where we do things in a certain way. And from my understanding, especially in Lithuania, this thing is being understood, theater show is being understood as a piece of architecture. We even have like a name, pastatymas, which literally means a building. It means we build, we put bricks on top of one another, and we have a performance like this. For me, it seems more that, you know, performance is a living being. So if we speak about making of it, we don't build it, we actually give birth to it, and that's, again, a very female approach. And the organizational structure is not about the hierarchy. You know, there is a director, there is a performer, and then there is a musician who comes in later, but it's more of a self-organizing process of a living being, if you may, because, you know, the organism also, it doesn't grow bit by bit, part by part. It grows as a whole. It becomes bigger and bigger. So that's how I see the performance. You know, you don't just write the text and then direct it. You actually write the text and you know the direction in which it's going, and then more text appears. That's my way of creating anyway. And the creative approach, according to what I think, should not be interdisciplinary. By that I mean that it should not be thought of in such a way that, okay, in order to make theater, we need to have certain disciplines. I think, you know, it should be more post-disciplinary, where we should get rid of this understanding of disciplines and what is required to make theater. Maybe, you know, I want to cook a nice meal and call it a piece of theater. If I manage to, you know, stage it in such a way in which it will be a performance, I think that should be allowed. So this, yes, this post-disciplinarity seems like an important concept here. And the timeline, of course, it's always an issue in the real world. We normally have schedules to make things, but I think in understanding theater as a living being, it's really hard to predict when is it going to actually be finalized. So ideally, it should be process-based. We know when it is completed. We know when it's being given birth to. But of course, it is always a difficulty in the real world. But this is the ideal version of the theater of consciousness. And also, in relation to the circumstances of the showing, you know, according to my understanding, theater or theater of consciousness should interact with the surroundings and make space for things to emerge. And the last, but definitely not the least important one, the outcome, should not be result-oriented in a sense that it should not be about the product and the sales and popularity, especially, or recognition, but it should be about the personal change. And I believe that the personal is always the political, so if you change personally, it will definitely bring about the change in your community. So that's sort of the layout of the theater of consciousness, which I've been working towards developing. And as for the creators who are willing to make this kind of work, I have a few recommendations, and they go like this. Straighten your intention. First of all, it all starts with intention. Sometimes this intention might not be what you think it is. Sometimes you might think that you are doing something great and noble, but actually underneath it all, it's only there to boost your ego. So really be honest with yourself why you're doing this, and if you're doing it for the sake of boosting the ego, go and do it, for sure, do it. But be aware that it might not be as satisfying as a result. Set your limitations. Your limitations might be whatever you make them. Perhaps you'll take an exact script and you will need these exact actors, and every single word on it will have to be told. Perhaps, as a comedian done in this year's Fringe, you will go to an audience member and ask them, what is your problem? And from that, you will make a show. So it's really up to you, but you need to know your limitations, what exactly you are doing and what you cannot do. Evaluate your resources. Your resources are not necessarily the stage, the actor, and the lighting design. Your resources, first of all, is your imagination. And if you only have audience and you have the time to spend with them, you already have resources. There is nothing else required, because from this connection you can build. Make space for things to emerge. I think, yes, this is hard, of course, but it is important to make a little bit of space for things to happen that may go unexpectedly. Play, obviously, if you make space for things to emerge, you gotta play with them. And most importantly, allow yourself to be played, because definitely things will not go the way you want them, and you will have to deal with it. That's all. Thank you very much for listening.